The poems in Rooms and Old Houses span almost 40 years of my life. The oldest poem, Tourists, dates to the summer between my senior year of high school and my freshman year of college. The newest poem, Success in Middle Age, is only a few weeks old as of the publication of the book in September 2020. I want to add readings of all the poems in the book to this playlist, but I've chosen to start with poems that have pride of place for me. The title poem, obviously, but also poems that best represent to me the themes from Rooms and Old Houses. The title poem, like so many of my poems, winds back to Seacoast, New Hampshire. The terrain of the seacoast plays an outsized role in my poetry, but I am not a nature poet. I lack the encyclopedic knowledge of plant and animal names that good nature poets tend to have. Instead, I often write about an imaginary landscape, a landscape that becomes a character in its own right in some of my poems. The dark woods of New England make it easy to believe. Not far from Salem, Massachusetts, I always found it easy to understand why the early European settlers could have believed themselves to be on the edge of darkness or to sense magic in the terrain. In my own case, that sense developed into elements of magical realism, a sense that also extends to indoor places. The kernel of the poem Rooms and Old Houses grew from an apartment I lived in many years ago. The house had been cut up into apartments, and the generally odd dimensions that those apartments tend to have created, in this case, a narrow hallway to one of the bedrooms. My own bedroom in that apartment was a converted attic space under the eaves. The kernel of the poem came from my own musings about all of the people who had lived in that house over the years. I first imagined all of us crowded under the eaves in my attic bedroom or packed into the narrow hallway. The idea evolved to have a touch of magical realism, with shades of people and objects remaining in the apartment, accumulating sunlight and meaning. The poem In the Aquarium also occupies a special place for me as a writer. I originally gave it the title A Sense of Place because for me it reflects a sense of wonder, of how we as human beings can think about our place in the world. For quite a few years, I thought of it as the best example I could point to as the kind of work I wanted to create. I still love what it represents. The poem The Attic of Perished Dreams also almost became the title poem for my collection. Similarly to Rooms and Old Houses, the kernel grew from a place where I used to live. It was another old house, one that I rented with roommates. I would often write until late at night. My roommates had frequently dispersed for the day by the time I woke up, leaving me with the house to myself. I would sit at a dented wooden table in a sunny room, reading and writing poetry while I ate breakfast and began my day. But I wrote the poem in retrospect, looking back at that sunny room with its dented table as a waypoint on what turned into a winding path for me. I see the poem as a chance to weigh myself as a man now against who I was then and where I had wanted to go. Sometimes our dreams point to true north, sometimes they don't. Success in Middle Age, as the newest poem in the book, also occupies a special place for me. The poem grew from a protracted and painful period in my life, a span that included, among other things, a career implosion and the deaths of both my parents. That span left me with a sense of the fragility of both success and failure, and an increased willingness to dwell in each moment. I learned to practice gratitude even when doing so feels difficult. What Time and the River Tell Me is the last poem on the playlist and the last poem in the book. It also nearly became the title poem. Because my poetry has strong ties to the landscape of the northeastern US, particularly New England, I have often had conflicting feelings and had to make difficult choices about when to stay in a particular place or when to go. I had a difficult time leaving Portland, Maine to start grad school in Boston. I felt conflicted about returning to the Midwest to accept a job in Madison, Wisconsin. I felt relieved to return to Ithaca and the wooded terrain of the Northeast. It is no accident that I have begun to thrive again as a writer since coming back. What time and the river tell me is about decisions to stay or go. Some situations are meant to last, others are not. But those situations can live on like rooms in old houses, accumulating meaning and sunshine and serving as waypoints on our journeys. And so, rooms in old houses.